Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our first day tutorial inside 3D Studio Max. So, if you were following along before, chances are your scene is a little messed up in some of the perspectives and viewports. Now, the first thing I want you to get used to doing when you start working on a new scene in 3D Studio Max is getting used to resetting 3D Studio Max after you're done working on something. This will reset all the values and all the viewports of 3D Studio Max back to the default, so it makes it a little easier to start something new. To do that, we go to our top left part of our menu. We click on the 3 Max icon, and you'll notice that below the New option, there's a Reset button. If you click on that, it will say the scene has been modified and you want to save your changes. If you don't want to save what you've been working on, that's fine. Just click Don't Save. If you do want to save what you were working on, click Save. I don't need to save right now, so I will click Don't Save. And then it will say, do you really want to reset? Now, chances are if you click this by accident, you don't want to reset, but if you really do, click yes. You'll notice my scene defaults back to the regular startup of 3D Studio Max, and we're good to go again. So in our last tutorial, we covered the toolbar and hotbar, scene and layer manager, our timeline trackbar, our camera shortcuts, command panel, and our viewports. We now know the different sections of 3D Studio Max, not in too much detail, but at least we know where they're located. So the first thing we want to learn now is to go over our camera keys that we learned in the last tutorial. We want to remember these because these are going to be very important as we play along. Remember that we have the shortcut keys to maximize and minimize our viewports, which is Alt and W. To use that, you can hover above any viewport and just click Alt and W. You'll notice that a yellow border comes around that viewport, which means that you are now in that viewport and it is active. That is now your selective active viewport. It doesn't really do much. It's just telling you what viewport you're working in at the current moment, and by clicking a key in that viewport, the border becomes yellow around that viewport. If I click on this viewport, you'll notice a yellow border. Click here, click here, click here, and if we scroll wheel in and out on any viewport, so remember the scroll wheel, zoom in and zoom out. Hold down the middle mouse button to pan the camera. Hold Alt and the middle mouse button to rotate, or you can play around with the view cube here. Don't forget to change the rendering type. Right now we're set to default shading. You can push F3 to go to wireframe mode, and F3 to go back to default shading, and F4 to go to default shading with edge faces, and click F4 again to do it without edge faces. So now that we played around with the camera a bit, we kind of know the camera keys, we need to start creating objects in 3D Studio Max. So this is going to be a basic shape creation tutorial. So what we want to do first is start creating a box shape inside 3D Studio Max. So to do that, we're going to look at our command panel. I'm going to reset my scene here. I'm going to push Z on the keyboard. Don't forget that key as well. Z for zoom all extents or focus, which will reset my view to focus on the middle pivot point. And now I want to create a new object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the right here, and I'm going to make sure that we're in our create panel. This is the panel that allows us to create new geometry, particles, forces, cameras, lights. Pretty much everything inside 3D Studio Max is created right in the create panel itself, which kind of makes sense. If we scroll down our mouse here, we're going to notice we're in the geometry menu. Now take a second and look through the rest of the menu, and you'll notice that we can also create shapes, lights, cameras, helpers, space warps, and systems. So in the create panel, we have access to all these different submenus that allow us to create new objects. So below the geometry panel, which is now our currently active one, and just as a helpful hint, anything inside 3D Studio Max that's blue, highlighted blue around it, means it's active. So this is our active menu. When I clicked on the zoom icon in our last tutorial, you'll notice it turned blue as well, which meant it was active. So anytime something is active in 3D Studio Max, it's blue. Anytime it's not active, it's gray. So when we want to create a new object inside 3D Studio Max, we have to choose our object type to work from. There's always has to be a base object that we need to create something from. It can either be a single polygon, or it can be as complex as a teapot, a torus, a cylinder, tube, etc., etc. But for right now, we want to work from a simple box. Boxes are the most simple shape inside 3D Studio Max, so let's create one. If I click on box, just left click on box once, you're going to notice we get a parameter box that opens up down here, which has suggestions for length, width, height, and how many segments we have on our object. Now we can play around with these and left click on our scene and it'll create a box for us. But what I really like to do is take full control over this box as we create it. So with box mode, it just turned blue when I left clicked it, which means it's now the active mode. We are now in box creation mode, and my mouse cursor is no longer a mouse cursor, but a crosshair. So now if we left click and drag inside 3D Studio Max, we get the base of my box. If I let go of left click, we're still not done creating our box. It goes into the second box mode, which is creating the height of the box. So left click and drag to create the base of the box. Let go of left click and then move your mouse again, and it will create the height of the box. Left click one last time, and it's done creating that box. You'll notice, however, we're still in box creation mode, and it's no, my mouse isn't still showing, it's still a crosshair, which means no matter what I do, I'm still creating new boxes. Every time I left click anywhere in my scene, I'm creating a new box constantly. But I want to get out of box mode. I'm done creating boxes. Let's say 5 boxes is exactly what I needed to make. Perfect. Now I need to get out of box creation mode. I can do one of two things. I can either click on a different menu item and it'll get out of box mode but go into a different mode, or I can cancel all modes completely by right clicking. You'll notice that box mode is gone now because I right clicked, and then right click disables anything that's currently active. Sometimes it takes 2 right clicks to disable something that's currently active. But for right now, 1 right click was enough to cancel box mode out. I was able to create 5 different boxes, and that also works for cylinder mode as well. Cylinder, I left click and drag to create the base of the cylinder, let go of left click, and I know now I have to create the height of a cylinder, and left click, and it's done creating a cylinder, but I'm still in cylinder mode. Remember, right click to get out of the creation mode. Okay? Now, that was for box and cylinder, but some objects don't have a secondary creation mode. For instance, if you're creating a sphere, there is no length, width, and height to a sphere. There's only a radius, and you'll notice in the parameters that it only has a radius option as well. If I left click and drag, the radius in the parameters gets bigger. And if I let go left click, it's already done creating the sphere. And anytime I left click in somewhere else, it's creating spheres right away. I right click to get out of sphere mode. Practice creating a whole bunch of objects. Create some cylinders, create some boxes, create some spheres. Get used to creating every single type of object in here until you have a scene that's filled with objects. For instance, I left click and drag to create the base of a cone. I then let go of left click and I drag up to create the height. But it actually has a third mode. If I left click now and I move my mouse, you'll notice it tapers, bigger or smaller. So some objects have a whole bunch of different modes to work with. Some have 1, some have 2, some have 3. Play around with them and figure out exactly what type of mode they do. It always has to do with left click. Normally, it's because it has length, width, and height. So if you plan out an object, you could probably guess exactly how many modes it has to go through before it's fully created. So if I want to create a tube, I know a tube has length and width. I know it has a height. So length, a width, and a height. Just like that. Right click to get out of that mode. I want to create a teapot. It does length, width, and height automatically like a sphere. You can right click to get out of that mode. So practice creating a whole bunch of objects. Now, you can either pause this video or let this video go on as you're creating objects. But what I'd like you to do next is we're going to learn how to move, rotate, and scale the objects we've created. I'm going to clear out my screen by left clicking and dragging inside my viewport. I'm going to left click and drag anywhere in my viewport, and it's going to create a marquee tool. Don't left click and drag on an object. I would suggest always left clicking off an object to grab as many objects as you can with your square tool. And then you hit the delete key. Or if you're really want to reset everything, just go to the 3 max in the top left corner, go to reset, don't save the changes. And do you really want to reset? Of course I do, yes. And now I'm back to my standard viewing of 3D Studio Max. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a basic box, just a small box. Left click and drag, and then left click, and then right click to disable the creation of this box. Perfect. I have a tiny little box that I want to play around with. So I'm going to teach you 4 shortcut keys. This is going to be really important to remember. These will be the most common keys used in 3D Studio Max, I promise you. So take very careful note of exactly the keys I'm about to teach you on the keyboard. And they're an easy location to remember. It is Q, W, E, R. On the top left of your keyboard, you have Q, W, E, R, and those are the 4 most important keys inside 3D Studio Max. I guarantee it. So let's go through each of them right now. I'm going to maximize my viewport with my little cube by pushing Alt W, or going to the plus sign inside 3D Studio Max and going Maximize Viewport. So inside, when we create an object inside 3D Studio Max, we can left click on that object. Now, when your mouse is above an object, it has a yellow border around it, which means you have it highlighted, but it's not selected. I left click on it, and that turns blue, and that means it's your selected object. You'll notice in our Scene and Layer Manager right here that when I click on it, it actually selects it in our Scene and Layer Manager as well. And then you'll also notice on the right-hand side, it says name and color of our object. If we're in Create Geometry mode, it will show us still the name and color of the object we currently have selected. We can change the name and color, and I suggest you do so right now. Let's call this Test Box. And you'll notice now, not only is it called Test Box here in name and color in our geometry panel, it's also called it in our Scene and Layer Manager. This makes it easier for you to play around with objects and know exactly which one you're grabbing. You can also change the color simply by clicking on the little box with the color in it. It'll open up a color palette of which you can change to any color you want. I want to make a yellowish box. Perfect. So when you left click on your object, you're probably going to notice that there is a couple of red lines and a gray line through it that show X, Y, and Z. But you can't do anything with this object right now. If I left click on it and drag, I just get my Marquee tool. And that's not exactly how we need to change our model. We need to change the type of tool we're accessing right now. If I push Q on my keyboard, I'm accessing what's called the Select tool. Okay? And if you look up at our hotbar here, you're going to notice that this is the Select Object tool. This is the Q key we're selecting. But what's changing when I hit Q over and over and over again is actually the way we select our objects. You're going to notice right here that it's going to change how we're selecting objects. Currently now, if I were to left click and drag in the scene, it's actually spray paint selecting our objects in our scene. If I push Q again, we're back to our rectangular selection tool, or what I like to call the Marquee tool. And you'll see I'm back to selecting with a box. And then if I push Q one more time, it's a circle, etc., etc. And that's by clicking Q over and over again. Just remember that Q is your select object tool. Q is also a good way to reset all the tools inside 3D Studio Max. If I were in box creation mode and created a box and wanted to get out of box mode, I would hit Q on the keyboard. Notice that box mode is no longer active and select object mode is now reactive again. It makes it a little bit easier to play around the scene a little bit faster. Now, I would normally suggest to just right click anyways and then push Q on the keyboard to go to select object mode. But if you prefer, to save you from one click away, just hit Q right after you're done creating an object to go into select object mode. Now, you'll notice that when we select these objects, there's still two red lines and a gray line, and we can't move or alter or change any of them. I'm going to go back to my Marquee selection tool, since I prefer that. So we need to move. We need to go to a different tool called the Move tool, and that's W on our keyboard. W for the Move tool. Okay? So if I click on my object, and I push Q, nothing really happens. It just will change the tool type here. So that does not do anything for me. But watch what happens when I push W on my keyboard. Now we have three different lines. We have a blue line, a red line, and a green line, which all have little yellow lines connecting them as well. Green is the y-axis, red is the x-axis, and blue is the z-axis. You'll notice if I hover my mouse above one of the arrows, it turns yellow, which means it will be my active arrow if I left click and hold on it. So if I want to move something in the y direction, I hover my mouse above that arrow until it turns yellow, and then I left click and hold, and then move it. And now it's moving my object inside 3D Studio Max. You'll notice I can move it on the X, the Y, and the Z. Also, special tip, there's normally a box in between all the lines. This allows you to access what's called freeform move mode, which allows you to freeform and move this box wherever you see fit. Now, I wouldn't recommend this mode since it's not perfect, but if you play around and move the camera and then use the Move tool, you can move an object exactly where you want it pretty easily. So for instance, if I were to create another box and right click, and the Move tool is still active, see I can push Q or I can push W. I'll just move it over here. And then I'll take this box that I created here, move it over here. Now I got my 3 boxes. So practice moving the boxes around a little bit with the move tool. Remember to push Q to go to select mode, to select the box, go to W to access the move tool. Now, even if you don't have Q active, let's say W is active, so you can see that select object mode isn't on, but the move tool is on, you can still select the other object. Select the object mode is usually constantly on. As long as you're accessing one of the 4 QWER tools, select object is normally always active. So just remember that as you're playing around in your scene. I can left click, so even though we're in W mode, which is move mode, I can still access any of these objects and move them as I see fit without a single issue. So, our next tool, we learned that Q is the select object tool, W is the move tool, the E is our rotate tool. And you're going to notice we're actually going through the hot bar right here. So we're learning the hotkeys that actually alter the hot bar. So that's why I suggest that we don't really have to learn the hot bar itself unless we really have to focus on left clicking, or you don't have a keyboard for any reason. But W, E, and the next tool we'll learn after that are all right beside each other. So W, move, I click E, and then we have select and rotate. If I click on an object, it kind of looks exactly like the move tool, but however, it's an orb. It has our green, red, and blue lines, and if I hover above one of the lines, it turns yellow. I left click and hold, and it rotates the object in the direction I choose. There's even 2 little arrows that show me which direction I'm rotating it in. Am I rotating upwards or downwards? Upwards or downwards? And we can rotate in any direction. Now, just like our our move tool had a little box in it, which allowed us to freeform move, this one allows us to freeform rotate if we click anywhere in the orb that isn't a line. You'll notice if I left click and hold here in the middle of nowhere of the orb, the whole orb goes gray. Now if I move, you can see it's completely freeform all around the object. This is good for getting precision if your object's a little bit more, I should say, wonky than using normal dynamic measurements. So remember that left clicking and rotate, left clicking on anywhere in the orb other than the lines will go into freeform rotate mode. W, we can move across any of these axes, or we can left click on this little box here and go into freeform move mode as well. Don't forget that Control Z is the undo key, Control Y is the redo key. So Control Z, Control Y. And don't forget, I will mark down all these hotkeys right beside all of this and send it to you, so no problem. So Control Z, Control Y. We have the move, rotate, which are 2. So far we learned Q, select object, W, move, E, rotate, and then we have the R key. The R key is the scale key. So by pushing the R key, you're going to notice instead of having an orb, instead of having these lines here, we actually have a triangle. Now the R key has multiple modes as well. So you'll see if I keep clicking the R key, we're actually out of scale mode, and now we're select and non-uniform scale. We're now on select and squash mode. And if I push R key here, we're on select and uniform scale. Now, for this tutorial, we're going to want select and uniform scale, as this allows us to scale up something very accurately in one direction. But also, if we click on any of these little lines here, you'll notice they turn yellow. This will only scale on the y-axis, this will only scale on the x-axis, and this will only scale on the z-axis. But if I click in the middle of all these, the entire triangle goes yellow, which means it's going to uniform scale if I left click and hold. So I can click on Y and scale it here for sure. I can click on X and scale it in this direction as well. Or I can scale all directions by left clicking in the middle. So I want you to practice moving and rotating and scaling with a very small project. And I want you to build a box character. And I'm going to show you a really quick example right now of how to build it. So using your middle mouse button to pan the camera, Alt middle mouse button to rotate, scroll in, scroll out with the wheel in, wheel out. I want you to create a box character just by creating a box here. Left click and drag, left click and drag. Do the same here. Like so. It doesn't have to be perfect right now, but try and match it up as best you can with the scale tool as well. Scale tool like that. And then create more boxes. So all I'm using is move, rotate, scale, move, rotate, scale. I just want to make sure that you guys understand how to move, rotate, and scale objects inside 3D Studio Max to get them looking fairly in the position that you desire. Don't forget that we're also able to change the name of an object. So if you'd like to call this part pelvis, we can actually go into this menu here where it says name and color and write pelvis. And we can change the color of it to anything we want by left clicking on this little color icon here and changing it to anything we want. So right now I have a blue pelvis. If I click on one leg, or if I use the Marquee tool and grab multiple legs, I can change these colors to whatever I'd like as well. We have green. And let's say I grab these 2 feet. I'm going to mark these orange. So one really quick shortcut key to learn as you're doing this character is you're going to notice that you want to select multiple objects at a time sometimes. Now, you can use the Marquee tool and try your best to grab as many objects as possible for sure, but that's going to be a bit annoying when there's objects in the way. So for instance, let's say I just want to grab this shoe and this leg, but I have this object in the way. So no matter what I try and do, I'm always going to grab that object, and it's really frustrating. So instead, what I'd like to do is click one object, hold Control, and click another object. This allows us to select multiple objects. So I can hold Control and click as many objects as I want. If I want to deselect an object out of all my selections, I hold the Alt key. Alt key to deselect, hold Control to select more objects. So now I can scale everything together. If I hold Alt, I can get rid of an object and scale everything else. And that helps me select more objects at the same time. Last but not least, there's one last key I'd like to tell you about. As you build your characters, this will make it a lot easier for you to build these box characters more accurately, is you'll notice that I made 2 feet. And even though I colored them the same, they don't look the same. We need to duplicate an object. And I'm going to show you a very easy way to duplicate an object. I want you to click on the object you want to duplicate. So for instance, this shoe. And I'm going to click W to go into move mode. What I want you to do is hold the shift key and then move that object. So I'm going to hold the shift key and move on the Y axis here. And you'll notice it's going to create a new object. If I let go of left click, you'll notice it says clone options. So by holding shift and moving an object, you can clone that object. Now we're going to copy it, and we can give it a name as well if we want right here. We can actually even change the amount of copies you need. But for right now, just one copy, and we're going to name this shoe left. Hit enter on the keyboard. And now we have 2 of the exact same shoe in our scene. I can actually delete this model by hitting the delete key on my keyboard. Delete. And I can move this right into place right there. And now we're starting to see the base of our character. I'll even get rid of this leg, hold shift, copy this leg over. So really I can just build one arm and then copy that arm over after I'm done. I can even copy this pelvis to make the body. Copy. And what I'm going to use now is the scale tool. And then move it downwards. Then I'm going to just change the color of this so it looks like a different body. There you go. And now I want you to keep practicing. I want you to keep making a model. I'm going to use the move tool. Rotate my key right there. We can even copy, move this aside so that we don't have to create new boxes every single time. Now I don't want you to get too lazy with this. I want you to actually scale and make a full box character that has an upper arm, a lower arm. I'm going to use the scale tool here. So use the tools like move, scale, rotate. You see I'm getting some detail in here. Even though it's not a lot of major detail, I'm actually getting the shapes pretty much exactly where I want them to be. By moving, rotating, and scaling. There we go. Right there, move, rotate, scale, move, rotate, scale. Like that. Change some colors. I'm going to change these to more skin colors maybe. Like that. And now we have an arm here, okay? And now we want to copy this arm. So let's say you wanted to copy this entire arm over. Just grab all the objects of the arm, hold shift and move it. Push copy, and then I'll move it in place. If you're feeling really advanced, I'd like you to give the character a box hair, maybe box eyes and a box nose as well. Maybe a chest, upper body, and a lower body. So for instance, right now, I have just an upper body. Don't mind that. I literally just kept pushing R too much and went into a different scale mode that squished. So remember to hit the R key often enough to switch between the different types of scale modes. And now I have an upper body and a lower body. So I'm adding a lot more detail just by creating more boxes. And I'll probably do the same for these as well. And I want you to get this much detail in it too. So I'm going to rotate that slightly. I'm going to copy it. And all I'm doing is creating copies. We're not going to focus too many on super complicated tools right now. I really just want to get you guys used to creating shapes, manipulating them with the move, rotate, and scale keys, and playing around with the camera to get a character that looks at least this good. If not, add more detail to it if you feel like you have more time in the day. I'd like this done by the end of Monday night and sent to me to my email, david@academyofdesigntechnology.com. Please send that to me by first thing, sorry, late night, Monday night, or first thing Tuesday morning. Using the move, rotate, and scale tools, play around with the camera, get all character looking right, and just play around. If you're having difficulty with this, just let me know. But go over the tutorials one more time, and I think you'll be fine for creating a simple box character like this out of boxes by using the move, rotate, and scale tools, which is Q for select, W for move, E for rotate, and R for scale, and then creating boxes here using those tools and manipulating the camera, and I guarantee you'll be able to make a box character in no time. And remember, don't focus on complicated details. I just want to see that you can create a basic looking character that looks like a human being of any proportional size with boxes. The more detail you add, the better it is for you. Don't cheat yourself on this assignment and just do it. And I guarantee the next step will get more complicated as every step goes on and learn a new tool every single time. Thank you very much for your time today. Don't forget to consult the shortcut key list. That will be very important for you. And I think you'll have an easy time with this. Remember, please hand it in to me by latest Monday night or Tuesday morning, first thing. Thank you very much, guys. I look forward to talking to you some more.